Have you ever bought something you did not really need just because it was on sale? Have you ever been absolutely sure about something only to find out later you were completely wrong? Have you ever trusted your gut feeling, made a decision, and then wondered afterward why you did that? If you have, you are not alone. And here is the thing, it is not your fault. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do. It is taking shortcuts. It is making quick judgments. It is trying to save energy. But those shortcuts, they are lying to you every single day. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most important books ever written about the human mind. A book that will change the way you think about thinking. A book that explains why smart people make terrible decisions, why we fall for illusions we cannot see, and why the brain you trust so much is actually playing tricks on you constantly. The book is called Thinking, Fast and Slow, written by Daniel Kahneman, and by the end of this video, you will never look at your own thoughts the same way again. Welcome to the channel. If you are here for the first time, this is the place where we break down the world's most powerful books into clear, simple, and life-changing ideas. If that sounds like something you want more of, go ahead and hit subscribe right now. It means the world to us, and it helps more people discover these ideas. Now, let us get into it. Before we talk about the book, let us talk about the man who wrote it. Because Daniel Kahneman is not just any author. He is a Nobel Prize-winning psychologist. And yes, you heard that right. A psychologist won the Nobel Prize in economics. That fact alone tells you how groundbreaking his work is. Kahneman was born in Tel Aviv in 1934. He grew up during a time of enormous uncertainty, living through World War II as a Jewish child in Europe. From a young age, he was fascinated by why people behave the way they do. Why do they make choices that hurt themselves? Why do they act against their own interests? These questions stayed with him for decades. He spent his career at some of the world's top universities, including Princeton and Berkeley. But his most important work came from a partnership with his close friend and fellow researcher, Amos Tversky. Together, Kahneman and Tversky spent years running experiments, asking people simple questions, and discovering that humans are not the rational decision makers we think we are. Their findings were shocking to the world of economics, which had long assumed that people always act logically and in their own best interest. Kahneman and Tversky proved that assumption wrong over and over again. Kahneman published Thinking, Fast and Slow in 2011, and it became an immediate global bestseller. It has sold millions of copies worldwide and has been translated into dozens of languages. The book was named one of the best books of the year by almost every major publication. It is used in business schools, psychology departments, government policy offices, and sports coaching programs. It has influenced how doctors make diagnoses, how investors manage money, and how companies design their products. The core problem the book solves is this: why do we make bad decisions even when we think we are being careful? And the answer, as Kahneman explains it, lies in the structure of the mind itself. We have two different ways of thinking, and they are constantly in conflict. Understanding how they work is the key to making better choices, living a more honest life, and avoiding the traps that catch almost everyone. So let us start from the very beginning. Let us talk about System 1 and System 2. Imagine you are walking down the street and someone smiles at you. Instantly, without thinking, you smile back. You did not decide to do that. You did not weigh the pros and cons. It just happened. That is System 1 at work. Now imagine you are trying to figure out the tip at a restaurant. The bill is $93.40, and you want to leave 18%. Suddenly, your face gets a little tense. You slow down. Maybe you pull out your phone to use the calculator. That is System 2. Kahneman says our minds operate in two very different modes. System 1 is fast, automatic, emotional, and effortless. It runs in the background all the time. It is what helps you drive a familiar route without thinking, recognize a friend's face in a crowd, or feel that something is off before you can explain why. System 1 makes thousands of small decisions for you every single day without ever asking your permission. System 2, on the other hand, is slow, deliberate, logical, and effortful. When you are solving a math problem, writing an important email, or learning a new skill, System 2 is engaged. It requires focus. It takes energy. And because it takes energy, your brain tries to use it as little as possible. Here is where it gets interesting. System 1 is brilliant, but it makes predictable mistakes. And because System 2 is lazy and slow, it often just agrees with whatever System 1 says rather than checking its work. This is the fundamental conflict at the heart of human thinking. We believe we are using System 2 when we are actually just running on System 1 autopilot. Let us make this concrete. Here is a famous puzzle Kahneman uses. A bat and a ball together cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Most people immediately say 10 cents. It just feels right. System 1 fires off the answer without a second thought. But if you slow down and actually do the math, you will realize the answer is 5 cents. If the ball costs 5 cents and the bat costs $1 more than that, the bat costs $1.05. Together, that is $1.10. System 1 was wrong, and System 2, unless you forced it to engage, never noticed. This is the pattern Kahneman shows throughout the entire book. Our fast, automatic thinking feels confident, feels certain, feels completely right, and is often completely wrong. And the scary part is not that we make these mistakes. The scary part is that we rarely catch them. Now let us go deeper. One of the most fascinating and important ideas in the book is what Kahneman calls cognitive ease. This is the idea that your brain loves things that feel familiar and easy to process. When something feels easy, your brain labels it as true, good, and trustworthy. When something feels difficult or unfamiliar, your brain becomes suspicious of it. Think about that for a moment. Your brain confuses easy with true. That is a huge problem. Here is an experiment to show you what this means. Researchers gave people a statement printed in a clear, easy-to-read font. Then they gave a different group the same statement printed in a small, blurry, hard-to-read font. The people reading the clear version were more likely to believe the statement was true. Not because the words were different, just because it was easier to read. Your brain equates ease with truth. This is why catchy slogans stick in our heads. This is why repeating a lie makes people more likely to believe it. Familiarity breeds trust in the brain, even when that trust has no basis in reality. Advertisers, politicians, and con artists have been exploiting this for centuries. Now let us talk about something equally surprising. Kahneman introduces us to the idea of anchoring, and once you understand it, you will start seeing it everywhere. Here is how it works. Before making a judgment or estimate, your brain grabs onto the first number or piece of information it encounters. That first number becomes the anchor. And everything after that gets pulled toward that anchor, whether it makes sense or not. In one famous experiment, participants were asked to spin a wheel that was rigged to stop at either 10 or 65. After spinning, they were asked to estimate the percentage of African countries in the United Nations. The people who spun 10 guessed around 25% on average. The people who spun 65 guessed around 45%. The random spinning of a wheel changed their answers about a completely unrelated question. That is, anchoring in action. This is why stores mark things as was $200, now $80. The 200 is the anchor. 80 feels like a bargain by comparison, even if the item was never really worth $200. This is why salary negotiations often go in favor of whoever names a number first. That first number sets the anchor for everything that follows. Kahneman also explains something he calls availability heuristic. A heuristic is basically a mental shortcut, and the availability heuristic says this: the easier it is to think of an example of something, the more common or important we think it is. Here is an example. Which kills more people every year in the United States, car accidents or stomach cancer? Most people say car accidents. They can easily picture a car crash. They have seen news stories about them. They know someone who was in one. But actually, stomach cancer kills far more people than car accidents. Because car accidents get more news coverage, they feel more common. What is easy to imagine feels more likely. What is less visible feels less dangerous. This explains so much about how we see the world, why people fear flying but not driving, why crime feels like it is increasing even when the statistics say it is going down, why we overestimate rare but dramatic risks and completely underestimate quiet, slow-moving dangers. Our brains are not measuring frequency by counting. We are measuring it by how quickly examples come to mind. And that is a terrible way to measure anything. Let us now talk about one of the most important and life-changing concepts in the book. Kahneman calls it loss aversion. The basic idea is this: losing something feels about twice as painful as gaining the same thing feels good. Losing $100 hurts much more than winning $100 feels good. This is not just a preference. It is a deeply wired feature of the human brain, and it shapes almost every important decision we make. Think about investing. Rational thinking says, if an investment has a good expected return, you should take it. But because losses hurt so much, people often refuse good investments out of fear of losing. They hold on to bad investments too long because selling would make the loss feel real. They make terrible long-term decisions just to avoid short-term pain. Think about relationships. How often do people stay in a job or a relationship that is not working simply because of what they would lose by leaving? The fear of loss keeps people trapped in situations that are costing them far more than they realize. Kahneman shows that loss aversion is one of the single biggest drivers of irrational human behavior. Understanding it is not just interesting, it is essential if you want to make better decisions in your finances, your career, and your life. Now let us talk about something Kahneman calls the planning fallacy, because this one is going to hit very close to home for most of you. Have you ever started a project thinking it would take 2 weeks, and then it ended up taking 2 months? Have you ever made a budget that you blew through in the first week? Have you ever been completely convinced you could finish something on time, only to miss the deadline by a wide margin? That is the planning fallacy. Kahneman found that humans are systematically and relentlessly over-optimistic about how long things will take, how much things will cost, and how many obstacles they will encounter. We always underestimate. Always. Why does this happen? Because when we plan, we focus on the best-case scenario. We imagine everything going smoothly. We do not wait in the delays, the surprises, the technical problems, the sick days, and the unexpected complications. We are planning from the inside, seeing only our own intentions and our own best efforts. The fix Kahneman suggests is called taking the outside view. Instead of thinking about your specific project, look at how long similar projects have taken in the past. If kitchen renovations typically take twice as long as planned, assume yours will too. If business plans typically overestimate revenue by 40%, build that into your projections. Use real-world data about base rates instead of relying on your overly optimistic imagination. This is used by the best project managers, the best investors, and the best leaders in the world. It is uncomfortable because it forces you to be honest about what is likely rather than what you hope. But it leads to far better outcomes. Let us now explore one of the most fascinating and counterintuitive ideas in the entire book. Kahneman calls it the halo effect. Here is how it works. When you form a positive impression of someone based on one characteristic, that positive feeling spreads to everything else about them. You give them the benefit of the doubt in areas that have nothing to do with the original positive trait. And the reverse is also true. One negative impression creates a halo of negativity around a person. Think about a job interview. A candidate walks in with perfect posture, a confident handshake, and a warm smile. Before they have said a single word, the interviewer already likes them. And because the interviewer likes them, They interpret every answer more charitably. Moments of hesitation get labeled as thoughtfulness. A slightly weak answer gets excused. The halo effect is in full operation. This is why attractive people are often perceived as more intelligent, more honest, and more competent, even without any evidence. This is why a charismatic leader gets away with mistakes that a less likable leader would never survive. And this is why our first impressions are so powerful and so dangerous. They color everything that comes after. Kahneman warns that we need to slow down and look at each piece of evidence separately. Instead of letting one positive trait flood your judgment, ask yourself what each specific piece of evidence actually tells you. Evaluate the interview answer, not the interviewer's charm. Judge the business idea, not the enthusiasm of the person presenting it. Now we need to talk about one of the most important distinctions in the book. Kahneman separates what he calls the experiencing self from the remembering self. This distinction is deep, and it will genuinely change how you think about happiness. Here is the key insight. The experiencing self lives in the present. It is the part of you that is actually feeling what is happening, moment by moment. The remembering self is the part of you that looks back and tells the story of what happened. And here is the shocking thing. The story the remembering self tells almost never matches what the experiencing self actually went through. Let us look at one of Kahneman's most famous experiments. Participants were asked to put one hand in painfully cold water for 60 seconds. Then they were asked to do it again, but this time they had to keep the hand in for 90 seconds. The first 30 seconds of the second trial were identically painful. But in the last 30 seconds, the temperature was raised slightly, making it just a little less painful. When asked which trial they would prefer to repeat, most people chose the 90-second trial. They preferred the objectively more painful and longer experience. Why? Because it ended slightly better. The ending mattered more than the total amount of pain experienced. Kahneman calls this the peak end rule. We remember experiences based on two things: the most intense moment and the final moment. The total duration barely matters. A wonderful vacation with a terrible last day will feel like a bad vacation. A painful medical procedure that ends gently will be remembered as less terrible than one that ends sharply. A friendship that ended badly can overshadow years of joy. This has massive implications. The experiences we choose, the way we design our lives, the moments we invest in, should account for how they will be remembered, not just how they feel in the moment. If you want to be thought of as a great dinner host, make the last few minutes of the evening special. If you want an experience to feel good in memory, make sure it ends well. Let us now talk about overconfidence, which Kahneman calls the most dangerous cognitive bias of all. Humans are shockingly overconfident in their own knowledge, their own predictions, and their own abilities. Studies consistently show that people rate themselves as above average in almost every positive trait, which is, of course, mathematically impossible for everyone to be. Here is one of the most striking examples Kahneman shares. He talks about financial analysts who spend their careers predicting the stock market. He analyzed decades of data and found that their year-to-year performance had almost no consistency. In other words, the analysts who performed best one year were not reliably better the next year. Their results looked essentially like random chance. Yet these same analysts were supremely confident in their predictions. They gave clients detailed explanations and projected high certainty. The confidence was completely disconnected from actual accuracy. This is what Kahneman calls an illusion of skill. We see patterns where none exist. We tell stories that make our successes feel inevitable, and our failures feel like exceptions. And because the stories feel coherent and satisfying, we mistake them for understanding. The antidote is calibrated humility, not the false modesty of saying you know nothing, but the honest awareness of the limits of your knowledge. The best forecasters in the world, Kahneman shows us, are the ones who say things like, "I am 60% confident," rather than "I am certain." They update their views when new evidence arrives. They track their own accuracy over time. and they are less swayed by dramatic stories and more focused on base rates and real data. Now, let us spend some time on one of the most practical and profound concepts in the book, the idea of what Kahneman calls experienced versus decision utility. Put simply, what we think will make us happy and what actually makes us happy are very often completely different things. Studies show that people strongly overestimate how happy winning the lottery will make them and how miserable a serious illness will make them. Major positive events feel less amazing after a while. Major negative events feel less devastating over time than we expect. We adapt. This is called hedonic adaptation, and it is one of the most robust findings in all of psychology. Yet we make enormous life decisions based on predictions about how we will feel. We take the high-paying job because we think money will make us happy. We move to the bigger house because we think space will bring joy. We avoid the scary conversation because we think conflict will crush us. And most of the time, our emotional forecasts are wrong. Kahneman urges us to look at the evidence about what actually contributes to well-being over time. Strong relationships, meaningful work, autonomy, the absence of severe stress. These things matter consistently. The corner office and the bigger car, they stop mattering much faster than you think. Let us now explore the concept of what Kahneman calls the substitution principle. This is one of the sneakiest things System 1 does. When you are faced with a hard question that you cannot easily answer, your brain quietly swaps it for an easier question, answers that one, and then presents the answer as if it responded to the original hard question. And you never notice the switch. Here is an example. Someone asks you, "How happy are you with your life overall?" That is a genuinely complex and difficult question. To answer it properly, you would need to think about dozens of different dimensions of your life, weigh them carefully, and come up with an honest assessment. But that is exhausting. So instead, your brain quietly asks itself, "How do I feel right now at this moment?" And it uses that as the answer to the bigger question. This is why people report being less happy on rainy days, even when directly asked about overall life satisfaction. It is why your mood in the morning affects how you evaluate your entire career. The easy question sneaks in and masquerades as the answer to the hard one. This happens constantly in politics, in business, in relationships, and in self-evaluation. The question, "Is this person a good leader?" gets quietly swapped for, "Do I like this person?" The question, "Is this investment sound?" gets swapped for, "Does this investment idea feel exciting?" Slow down, Kahneman says. Ask yourself whether you are actually answering the question you were asked, or whether you quietly switched to an easier one. Now let us talk about probability and why human beings are spectacularly bad at thinking about it. Kahneman introduces something called the representativeness heuristic, and it explains some of the most common errors in human thinking. Here is the classic example from the book. This one is famous. His name is Tom W. You are told that Tom W. is a quiet, orderly person who has a passion for detail, an interest in science fiction, and a shy personality. Now you are asked, is Tom more likely to be a librarian or a farmer? Almost everyone says librarian. Tom fits the image of a librarian perfectly. But here is the problem. There are vastly more farmers in the population than librarians. So statistically, even if Tom sounds like a librarian, he is far more likely to be a farmer simply because there are so many more farmers. But people ignore those base rates. They focus on how well the description matches the stereotype and forget to think about how many people are in each group. This is representativeness. We judge how likely something is by how much it resembles our mental image of that category, and we ignore the actual statistical probabilities. This leads to errors in medical diagnosis, legal judgment, hiring decisions, and almost every domain of human choice. Kahneman also introduces us to the concept of regression to the mean, which is both simple and deeply counterintuitive. Here is the idea. Extreme performances tend to be followed by less extreme performances, simply because extreme results often involve a large element of luck. But we almost never attribute performance to luck. We attribute it to skill, character, or effort. This creates a famous trap. A pilot trainee performs brilliantly on a flight simulation. The instructor praises them. The next flight is average. The instructor thinks praise made them complacent. Another trainee performs terribly. The instructor criticizes them harshly. The next flight is better. The instructor thinks the criticism worked. But what actually happened? Both performances were moving back toward average. The praise and the criticism had nothing to do with it. Yet we build elaborate theories of cause and effect based on what is really just statistical noise. This has enormous implications for management, coaching, parenting, and education. When you only criticize after bad performance and only praise after good performance, you will always believe that criticism works and praise does not, because of regression to the mean. The data will deceive you unless you understand the underlying statistics. Now let us look at one final major idea before we move to the most powerful lessons and quotes. Kahneman explores what he calls two selves and the nature of happiness. And this might be the most profound section of the entire book. He asks a deceptively simple question. What do we actually mean when we say we want to be happy? Are we talking about having lots of good moments? Or are we talking about looking back on our life and feeling that it was good? Because those two things can lead to very different choices. A vacation where you are relaxed and present every day and have no dramatic highs might be wonderful to experience, but less memorable than one where something extraordinary happened on the last day. A career with steady, meaningful daily work might feel deeply satisfying to live, but might seem less impressive in the story you tell about your life. A life lived fully in the present might look very different from a life lived in service of a great story to remember. Kahneman does not tell you which one to choose. He wants you to realize that most people have never even thought about this distinction. You have been making choices for your remembering self without realizing it, or making choices for your experiencing self and wondering why the memories feel flat. The wise move is to choose consciously with awareness of both selves and what each one truly needs. Now let us get to the quotes, because Kahneman puts things in ways that stay with you. Here is the first one. Nothing in life is as important as you think it is while you are thinking about it. Read that again. Nothing in life is as important as you think it is while you are thinking about it. Kahneman calls this the focusing illusion. Whatever you are focused on right now looms enormous in your mind. If you are thinking about your salary, it feels like the most important thing in the world. If you are thinking about where you live, that feels like the key to happiness. But the moment your focus shifts, those things shrink back to their actual size. This quote is a reminder to zoom out, to remember that the thing consuming your attention right now is not as large as it seems. That is one of the most calming ideas in psychology. Here is the second quote. The illusion that we understand the past fosters overconfidence in our ability to predict the future. We tell ourselves stories about why things happened the way they did. And because those stories feel logical, we believe we understand how the world works. But we are mostly constructing explanations after the fact. The future is far less predictable than we think. The humility to admit that is not weakness, it is wisdom. The third quote. We are prone to overestimate how much we understand about the world and to underestimate the role of chance in events. Luck matters far more than we want to believe. Success contains a large element of being in the right place at the right time, knowing the right people, or having the right context. That does not mean effort does not matter. It means that brilliant effort plus good luck beats brilliant effort alone, and it means we should be more humble about our successes and more compassionate about others' failures. Here is the fourth one. Confidence is a feeling, which reflects the coherence of the information and the ease of processing. It is not a reliable signal of accuracy. In other words, feeling confident does not mean you are right. Your brain generates confidence based on how smoothly a story hangs together, not on how many facts actually support it. A false belief, told with enough repetition, starts to feel true. A lie you have heard 100 times feels more familiar, and familiar feels true. Confidence is seductive, but it is not evidence. And the fifth quote, the main function of System 1 is to maintain and update a model of your personal world, which is what allows you to recognize, predict, end quote, and respond to events. System 1 is constantly building a map of reality. It is always updating, always simplifying, always filling in gaps with assumptions. It is the engine of our expectations. And when reality does not match the map, we often trust the map over reality. That is the root of so much human error, conflict, and pain. Knowing this is the beginning of changing it. All right, here is what you can do starting today. Because information without action is just entertainment. The first step is to pause before any important decision. Whenever you are about to make a choice that matters, whether it is financial, professional, or personal, pause. Ask yourself one question. Am I being driven by System 1 right now? Is this a gut reaction, a feeling of familiarity, or an emotional impulse? You do not have to distrust your instincts, but you should at least acknowledge when they are running the show and give System 2 a chance to weigh in before you commit. The second step is to seek the outside view. When you are planning anything, a project, a purchase, a move, stop and ask what has happened to other people who did the same thing. Look for real-world data. Talk to someone who has been there before. Read reviews, case studies, and records of similar situations. Your inside view is biased toward optimism. The outside view is the corrective lens you need. The third step is to watch for anchors. Before entering a negotiation, making a purchase, or evaluating an offer, notice the first number you encounter. That anchor is already working on your brain. Ask yourself what you would think if you had never seen that number. Try to form your own estimate before looking at any external reference point. This simple habit can save you enormous amounts of money and prevent you from being manipulated by whoever controls the first number in any conversation. The fourth step is to slow down your happiness predictions. The next time you are about to make a major life decision based on how you think it will make you feel, ask yourself, what does the actual evidence say? Talk to people who already have what you are chasing. Ask them honestly how it feels, not in the rosy moment of achievement, but 6 months in, when the novelty has worn off. Your emotional forecasts are systematically too extreme. Real data from real people is always more accurate than your imagination. The fifth step is to design better endings. Since we remember experiences based on their peak and their ending, pay attention to how things end. End conversations on a warm note. End projects with a celebration. End visits on a positive, meaningful moment. You cannot always control the middle, but you can often control the end. And the end is what gets remembered. To wrap up, let us talk about what this book truly is. Thinking, Fast and Slow is not just a book about psychology. It is a book about the human condition. It is about why we are the way we are, why we make the choices we make, and how we might, with effort and awareness, do a little better. It is humble and rigorous and full of surprises. And it is written by someone who spent a lifetime being genuinely curious about what goes on inside our heads. On a scale of 1 to 10, this book gets a 10 out of 10. Not because it is easy to read, because it is not. It is rich and dense and occasionally challenging. But because the ideas inside it are among the most important and most useful a thinking person can encounter, this book should be required reading for anyone who makes decisions, which is to say, everyone. If you are a business person, a parent, a student, a leader, an investor, or just someone who wants to understand themselves better, this book was written for you. If you have ever wondered why smart people make dumb choices, why you sometimes feel so certain and then turn out to be completely wrong, or why the world seems so much harder to predict than it should be, this book gives you answers, real ones, backed by decades of research. If this summary helped you today, please take just 5 seconds and hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people discover this content. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. Every week, we go deep into the books that matter, the ideas that change lives, and the lessons that most people never find because they never have the time to read. Leave a comment below and tell us, which idea from today hit you hardest? Was it loss aversion, the two selves, the planning fallacy, or something else entirely? We read every comment. Your thoughts matter here. And if you want to know which book is coming next, here is a small hint. It is about the invisible forces that shape every choice you make, the ones you never even notice until someone shows you exactly how they work. If you think Kahneman revealed how your mind deceives you, wait until you see how the world around you does it too. That one is coming very soon. Stay with us.